Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 26 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ersman, and I'll be your host today for an episode I think you're really going to enjoy. So as I'm recording this, if you listen the week it comes out, it is currently Holy Week, and so we're getting ready for Easter and Good Friday and Monday, Thursday, and it's obviously a very important week for Christians. It's a really great week to remember really the cornerstone events of our faith and just so much to be grateful for. But I know also a lot of you listening today work at churches, and so this week is also an incredibly busy and stressful time for many of you. I can speak from experience, and so if you are listening during Holy Week especially, just wanted to let you know your work is important, it's appreciated. Hang in there as you kind of put the final touches on your services, and I'm sure it's going to be a great weekend wherever you will be celebrating Easter this week. So one of my favorite things about this show is that we get to cover just a really wide range of topics. So of course, our kind of focus is church leaders and be church leaders, and so we focus a lot on church leadership. But we talked about politics, we've talked about singleness, we've talked about female leadership, we've talked about all kinds of things, which I think is really awesome. And so today we're hitting on something we haven't really hit on directly yet, and that is the idea of honoring God in the workplace. For those of you listening who maybe don't work at a church, maybe you volunteer at your church, you're a lay leader of some kind, or maybe you're bivocational, but there are a lot of ways that we can make an impact for the kingdom of God in our jobs, even if we don't work in a church, or maybe especially if we don't work in a church. And so I thought that'd be an interesting topic for us to tackle, and we're actually talking to a friend of mine today. I'm interviewing my friend Jason Lansdown here in Wichita, who he is the owner-operator of 2 Chick-fil-A restaurants. They are incredibly successful, and Jason is one of the best leaders I know. He is one of the most generous people I know. He's one of the kindest people I know. He's the kind of guy, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you even like Chick-fil-A or not, we all have a lot to learn from him in his leadership and just how he views his faith and how his faith plays such an integral role in his business. And so I think it's going to be a really great episode, especially for those of you listening who work in the workplace and looking for ways that your faith can make an impact in your day-to-day life. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. So thank you so much for listening. Just a little trigger warning, you're going to be hungry for chicken by the end of this episode. Just warning you. So pull up your Chick-fil-A app and just get ready to use those points because you're going to want some chicken. So we'll take a quick break from an ad from our sponsor and get right to a great conversation with my friend, Jason Lansdown.
MB Foundation provides biblical financial stewardship solutions to the Mennonite Brethren community. Inspired by 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19, we encourage and assist individuals, churches, and ministries to take hold of real life through generosity. We call that giving meaning to money. Our services include planned giving, loans, fund management, investment certificates, and stewardship education. With offices in Hillsborough, Kansas, and Fresno, California, we are ready to serve you. Learn more at www.mbfoundation.com or call us today at 1-800-551-1547. MB Foundation is pleased to partner with USMB to bring you this episode of Lead Pods.
All right, my friends. Well, today we're joined by a friend of mine who I've gotten to know really well over the past few years. He is a great friend. He's honestly kind of a mentor figure to me, a great leader in our church, a great leader in our community. We're joined by Jason Lansdown, who is the owner and operator of not 1, but 2 Chick-fil-A restaurants here in Wichita, and is a great business leader, great church leader. And I know we have a lot to learn from him today. So Jason, thanks so much for spending some time with us.
That's my pleasure, and thanks for the invite.
I'm glad you worked into my pleasure right off the bat. Way to go.
It's just second nature now.
I love it. All right, well, Jason, for people who don't know you listening today, can you give us a quick bio? I know you've been at Chick-fil-A for a while, but anything from your upbringing or your career that you can just give us a little bio before we get started here?
Sure. The short version is I'm from Wichita area. We bounced around from Wichita and a small town in southwest Missouri called Neosho as I was growing up. My wife and I met in high school, and we always had a dream of owning a business and using that as a business as a vehicle to not only provide a service or a product, but as a way to influence our community and honor God, because, we both grew up poor and people did great things to benefit us with their benevolence. And we just felt an obligation to do that for others. And so really that started a journey for us to seek what God wanted us to do with our life. And eventually that led us to Chick-fil-A. And it was a long process to become a Chick-fil-A owner operator. That's probably a different story for a different time. But eventually became a Chick-fil-A owner operator in Wichita, where we're from, and opened up our first location in 2012, and then we're blessed to open our second location in 2018. And we've been just having a fun time since then.
And I know before Chick-fil-A, you were a Blockbuster for a little while, right? Where else have you kind of worked your way up throughout that period?
Yeah, as we were doing trying to discern what God wanted us for life, we were going to school and doing jobs that, to pay the bills. And so that led us both to do some retail management for a while. I worked at Blockbuster for many years, like you mentioned, worked at a Best Buy locations in Kansas City to help with some HR stuff there for a while, and learned a lot from them, but those were never where we wanted to stay long term. And but I was able to get a lot of good experience, some business acumen from there, and they really I could point to specific times, things that I learned at those jobs that have helped me doing what I do today.
Well, that kind of leads us to today's main topic. So a lot of the people listening today, I know we have a lot of pastors, church leaders who listen, but I know we also have people who are lay leaders. They don't work at churches, but they probably volunteer, or at a minimum, they're at least really dedicated to their home church and their faith is important to them. So Jason, you're probably the best person I know who you work in the business world and you've had a lot of success, but your faith is still really important to you. And you found ways to use your business leadership and your experience in your business to really make an impact for the kingdom. So I really want to hear more about like how you do that, why that's important to you. So you mentioned that was kind of your goal from the beginning, right? Like, why is that so important to you?
Well, thank you for the kind words. First of all, that is something that's important. And I think that's the key to keep that important. It doesn't matter if you're working in a church or in the secular world. Our goal should be the same, as that to glorify God. And because that's, we're designed, we've been given gifts to use for God's glory. And I think it's just important to every day remind yourself that that's why we're here, regardless of what we're doing, big or small, that should be our primary goal.
And again, you just exemplify this really well. I guess I'm just curious, is there something else that really awakened that in you? You mentioned, and I know your story pretty well, that growing up, you were on the receiving end of generosity from some people who helped you when your family was struggling. Do you think, does that play a part of it? Or how are you so passionate about it when so many other people aren't quite as much?
Well, yeah, absolutely. We had people help both my wife and I when we were growing up to, we were the families that people would donate to at Christmas time, and that had a pretty profound impact on us. I did, as a teenager, get involved in church. Prior to then, I was kind of going down a not so great path, and I had two men who just poured into me and saw through, who I was at that moment and saw who I could be, and really invested in me and mentored me and showed me a different way and showed me, Christ's love in so many different ways. And so those things are key things that inspired us to do what we're doing. We sell chicken for a living, but we believe that we're capable of accomplishing more than that. The vision for our business is to be a place of refuge, and we try to accomplish that by the people we hire. We communicate that to them after we hire them and tell them, hey, we hired you because we believe you can help us be a place of refuge. And we try to create the environment where that's possible for our guests, for our employees, for our vendors. We're not perfect, and we miss the mark at times, just like anyone, but we aim for that every day.
And I know Chick-fil-A is kind of known for having Christian principles kind of built into its DNA. I know some people listening probably work at places that maybe that isn't quite the case. Has that ever been a problem where, since you personally and the business is kind of outspokenly Christian, is there ever a rub there kind of in the marketplace world where you've had to dance around that carefully?
Yeah, it's tricky. Chick-fil-A is not a Christian business technically, but we are a business that's based on Christian biblical principles. I like to say you don't have to be a Christian to own a Chick-fil-A. You don't have to be a Christian to work there. You certainly don't have to be a Christian to enjoy our food, but we do ask that we run our business based on Christian principles. So that's a fine line to walk. Some people are drawn to that, and some people, kind of get a little worked out of shape about it at times, but that shouldn't change who we are and what we do.
One thing I find so interesting about Christianity in general, like the principles that, Chick-fil-A operate under, or just Christian principles, things like generosity, good character, good service, treating other people as you would treat yourself, like those really are just good business principles, right? Like those are Christian principles, but it also is kind of a recipe for success in the business world too. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think, because they're biblical principles, and I think biblical truth is so applicable in so many areas, and business is one of those areas. And so I think things like generosity, having integrity, treating people with respect, having a servant's heart. Those are all things that are great in business and come directly from the Bible. I think a lot of non-Christian or very secular businesses take some of those things, and that's great, and maybe don't even realize that they're borrowing from biblical principles. I think it's kind of concerning when some businesses recognize that, hey, these things might help our business, and so they do it for that reason rather than for the right reason. I think you do see that sometimes.
Well, one thing you're a very humble man, Jason. I know you'll never brag, so I'll just briefly brag about you, just briefly. You're in a position now where you are incredibly financially generous. I know you give away food to people in need. You host events at your restaurants for free for families to benefit them. You're kind of in a place in your career where I don't want to put words in your mouth or make assumptions, but like, at least from my perspective, it's maybe a little bit easier for you to make a bigger impact with those kinds of things than maybe when you were first starting out. I guess, first of all, would you agree with that? Or do you think it's just equally as hard now that you're at the place where you're at?
Yeah, I think it's important to do those things regardless of how much you currently have. And that if you're able to do it with little, then you're able to do it with more. And, we are in a season of plenty, and there's risks with that and challenges that come with that. But we didn't always have that.
Right.
We had very meager backgrounds, my wife and I. And I remember clearly when we set off a different path to say, we want to be generous. We want to help others, even though we didn't have nearly as many resources as we currently do.
So what does that look like? If someone listening is like their faith is very important to them, they're in the marketplace, but maybe they're not at the top of the organization where they can do some of the things that you do. Like, what are some things that you've done, or do you have any ideas of how they can kind of practically live that out where they are?
People can, with their personal finances, do a lot more than they realize. So I think there's that. And that just takes a step of faith to say, I may not feel like I have enough money to do this, but with faith that we can be generous and help others. And God has a way of making things work out. So I think there's a personal aspect of it. I think people in organizations, even if they don't have a position of influence, have more influence than they sometimes realize. And I think that that's a place where sometimes Christians miss the mark, where we have an opportunity to lead upwards more than we think in an appropriate way to enact change from being who we are and standing for what we want, what we believe in, and encouraging others to make good decisions with the business.
Yeah, that's good. The one thing I know, again, just about you and about Chick-fil-A in general, is that, you said just a few minutes ago that you're not just selling chicken, right? It's a much bigger vision for you. And along with generosity, I know that like leadership development is something that you're really passionate about. And Chick-fil-A hires differently than McDonald's does. Just to be honest. And so can you talk about that a little bit? Other than the financial generosity, how else are you kind of day to day trying to live out your faith and help other people that you're working with, or customers, or both?
I think that's one of the most important things we do, is to train up and develop the next generation of leaders. And we have an opportunity. I think I would guess about 80% of our employees, this is their first job. And there are challenges that come with that. But I love the fact that we get to show them a unique way of doing business and a unique perspective on how things can be done, that hopefully that they will carry for the rest of their lives. That first glimpse of how do you run a business in a way that would try to be honoring to God, and how do you treat other employees, and how do you balance, the needs of the business and the needs of the people in a healthy way. And so I love that. I love the fact that we have young people. We know most of them are never going to stay with Chick-fil-A long term, and we actually celebrate that. We love the fact that we have the opportunity to influence future doctors, future lawyers, future teachers, future pastors by, showing them, a bit of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I'm curious to talk to you about, Jason. So, I mean, you have experienced quite a bit of success in the business world, and I know sometimes the church and Christianity in general just doesn't really know what to do with money or success. Like sometimes if people are really wealthy, it's almost that like we just don't really know how to feel about it. It's like, should they have that much money? Should they give more away? Is it okay if they have a lot of money? Like I think some people we're just not sure how to handle that. How do you think Christian business leaders should look at business as far as success? Is it wrong to want to kind of work your way up in those kinds of things? Have you wrestled with that at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is something that is a real thing to wrestle with. I understand why people tend to think that way at times. I think people tend to think that way because unfortunately, a lot of people, mess up and they make bad decisions once they
Yeah.
do get success and how that changes them or what they do with it. But inherently, I don't think there's anything wrong with success. In fact, I would argue that we should strive for success. It all comes down to we need to have the right perspective that everything we have is God's.
Mm-hmm.
It's not ours. It's given to us by God. We are stewards of his property.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I look at my business and say, this isn't mine, this belongs to God, he's put me in charge of it for a season. It belongs to him. Well, if this belongs to God, absolutely I'm going to want to grow it and do the best with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the parable of talents.
Mm-hmm.
We should want to grow what's been given to us. Where it becomes tricky and challenging is oftentimes, too many times, people start off with that right mindset. Yes, God has given this to me. I'm going to do what good with this for God. And over time, when the success comes, they forget that piece.
Mm-hmm.
They forget that it came from God and the success happened because of God and it still belongs to God. And we start to internalize, look how good I did. Look what I have to do with now. And that's where it becomes challenging. So I think as long as you can always remember, hey, this belongs to God. This is great that we have now more to do for the kingdom. We have more to do because of God's blessings. Then I think you're safe. But it does become dangerous and I would say sinful when we forget that we claim it as our own, and then that's where pride starts coming in, and then so I can understand why people think that, but I think it doesn't need to be that way.
I don't know if this is just your personality or if you've had to kind of fight this at all, but how have you been able to stay just so humble and grounded through all this? Like if I know a lot of people, often it takes some kind of stumble for them to realize their humility. Do you have any advice for kind of keeping that perspective? If people are kind of going through the ranks, how can we keep that humility perspective as we're going through our jobs?
I think it all comes back to, again, recognizing our position in relation to God. One of my favorite verses, humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, and he'll exalt you in due time. And I just think about us humbling ourselves before the mighty hand of God. We are just so blessed, all of us. I was sharing with my leaders just the other day, we had a meeting and we were talking about gratitude. We just went through a book about gratitude and joy. It was a great book. And one of the things we talked about was, God created everything and God saved us. That should be enough right there for us to have gratitude over everything and have just pure humility and humbleness before him because of how amazing he's been to all of us. Mm-hmm. Everything else is just extra. And so it's a discipline, I think, to challenge yourself every day to recognize your position in relation to God. And if you really understand the magnitude of that, then it becomes much more easy to be humble.
Mm-hmm. Just as you're saying that, Jason, I'm curious, again, so people listening may not be in a business or an organization like Chick-fil-A that kind of encourages some of the things you're talking about. And just hearing that you are taking leaders of your fast food restaurant through leadership training about gratitude, like, KFC is probably not doing that. So if someone listening, how much of that is Chick-fil-A and how much of that is you? And if someone listening is in a culture where that isn't part of what they're kind of encouraged to do, how can we kind of get started having that mindset as a leader?
Yeah. So I think, Chick-fil-A does a great job of that type of development for us as owner operators. I try to do something similar for my team. They haven't taught me or ran me through a book about gratitude, but that's just something that I felt was good for our team to go through. We've been going through kind of a 3-month journey on that. for me, it just comes back to what I said earlier. I'm here to do more than sell chicken. It's to impact people in our community. And part of that is pouring into my leaders. And we will have discussions that have zero to do about the business, zero to do about chicken, but it's all about becoming better people, better leaders, better spouses, better children, because I think we have the opportunity to influence. And so trying to do that when you're in a company or organization that isn't a priority, I think that type of change takes time. If you get small groups of people who start talking about these things and studying these things, you can enact change from the bottom up. It does take time. And I would say don't get discouraged when the change doesn't happen as long as you want or as quickly as you want. And also recognize that you are, if you're starting to talk about these things and having the discussions, that you're, if nothing else, you're planting seeds that you may never see what comes from that. But I'm fortunate to be in a situation where I'm the leader of our organization and I can make those things happen. But I recognize that not everybody has that freedom right now.
One thing I've heard sometimes is kind of the grass is always greener type situation. Sometimes I think people who don't work at churches think, oh, I can't make as much of an impact with my faith because I don't work at a church or I'm not a leader at my church. But then I look at people like you and I work with, live with, interact with Christians 99.9% of my life. And you get to interact with customers all the time, many of which who probably aren't Christians. So can you talk about that a little bit about wherever we are kind of using our platform, our community, our jobs or whatever, just to kind of make an impact wherever we are? Because I think it's true that we both see the ups and downs of each other's worlds, maybe more than we're aware of.
Absolutely. And I think certainly there's room for people who work in churches to influence people towards Christ. But I think you're absolutely correct that the challenge is when you work in a church that you have to fight to get outside of your Christian bubble.
Right.
And so many people live in a different bubble and they have, some more low hanging fruit, so to speak, of people that they rub shoulders with every single day that is as educated and as spiritual as someone who works in a church might be. They are never going to have that opportunity the way someone working right next to someone living life with them who needs Jesus just as much. They have the opportunity to show them the love of Christ, to be there for them, to answer the questions. And so I know it's scary, but those opportunities are real. I think there's a strong argument that lay people have a greater opportunity for impact for the kingdom in that way.
And again, I think you're a great example of that. I don't mean to put you on the spot,
Thank
but
you.
I'm just curious, do you have any examples? Because another thing that I think we're guilty of sometimes is we overcomplicate things. And we think that in order to make a difference, it's got to be some big grand gesture. But I know that you and Chick-fil-A, you excel in just really excellent customer service, but sometimes it's really little things, right? Just, saying hi to a kid or helping a mom that comes in or giving someone who needs some help, giving them a free sandwich. Do you have any kind of stories like that where just something sort of simple ended up being some kind of impactful story? Do you have any examples of that?
Several. I mean, we empower our team to follow their warm-hearted impulses, we say, to have these intentional acts of kindness to where if they feel like someone needs something, we empower them to take care of them. And so it's not uncommon to have people, give people free food when they look like they're having a bad day, when dining rooms were open, to sit down next to them and have a conversation. Or I've even seen people praying with people in the dining room. So there's opportunities for those things to happen. I think the key is we forget that the small things matter. In fact, I think sometimes they matter more. And we have this faulty belief sometimes that in order to make a big impact, you have to be in a position of great importance. And I think oftentimes the opposite is true, that the people who you wouldn't think are in the highest level positions actually have the greater impact to make a difference. The example I like to give to people, I actually had a speaking thing this morning where I spoke to some people and I asked them this question. I had them raise their hand if they've been to one of my Chick-fil-A's, and nearly everyone in the room raised their hands. And then I said, okay, keep your hand raised if when you went there, you believed I either made your sandwich or took your order for you. Every hand went down.
Yep.
And the point is, I'm the owner operator of the organization. There's an argument that I'm the most important person in the organization, but I believe the opposite is true. The people who are making the food, who are running the registers, who are out there with the guests, they actually have the greater opportunity to influence that interaction. When the guest leaves, they're going to remember how that person made them feel, not me. And so we forget that, well, my job matters, when really it matters so much more than people think about, more than they realize.
You just mentioned, giving away the free food. And I mentioned that, you guys host free events all the time. And there's Chick-fil-A has a lot of examples of things that are a little counterintuitive. They don't make immediate business sense. You give away so much stuff for free, but at the same time, Chick-fil-A is enormously successful. I know it's been locally, it's been a good year for you, and just nationwide, it's a very successful brand. So have you thought about or talked about that before, about how some of those counterintuitive things about kind of extreme generosity end up being really great business principles for you?
Yeah, sometimes when my wife and I sit there and we think about it and we kind of look at the metrics of it, it blows our mind. But you just can't outgive God, and we genuinely do it not to get a return on the business, but oftentimes that ends up being a byproduct of it. We genuinely do it because, like I said at the very beginning, we had people who poured into us and were generous to us, and it put us on a new path and a better path. And we want to seize the opportunity to do that for others. And we both grew up in broken homes and with parents who were, we were poor and they were working a lot of hours. And so family time didn't happen in an ideal way. And we, see opportunities to create family moments with some of our events and some of our activities. That's a passion for us. And so at the end of the day, I get much more joy, much more fulfillment by seeing a family having a great experience, a great moment that they're going to remember for a long time, compared to what our sales were or what our profit may have looked like.
And to that point, you said sometimes when you're extremely generous, it ends up paying out well for you. But sometimes, I don't know if you have experience with this, but I'm sure there's sometimes where it hurts a little or it stings a little financially, or maybe it doesn't lead to business success. And again, people listening, maybe they take some kind of action like that, where they do something that doesn't add up on the ledger sheet, but they feel like they're led to. Sometimes it might be a financially blessed by it, and sometimes it might be a sacrifice, but whether or not it pans out financially, it's still, the right thing to do, especially if you're feeling like God compelled you to do it. So that's tricky, because you have a lot of examples where it's paid off for you, but it doesn't always work that way.
Oh, there have been many times, often, where we'll do an event and, we lose money on the event because of the time, the materials, the labor, the decorations. We don't make money on the events that we do, but that can't be the only thing you look at.
Right.
When you look at return on investment, that's something that, business owners look at. What's the return on investment? And normally they're looking at, okay, I spent this, I got this in sales in return.
Right.
But we have to train ourselves to say the return is not always a financial return, but there's this emotional return, and sometimes maybe even a spiritual return that is out there that is also very important.
Well, shifting gears just a little bit, Jason, I want to talk to you. I know ever since you've been attending our church here, First and Being in Wichita, you've been really active in several different leadership roles. Now you're on our board. And again, I know this can be kind of tricky sometimes, but I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about kind of incorporating business principles in church world. I know some people might feel a little weird about that. It's not, the capital C church doesn't have a long history of kind of implementing business strategies in the church leadership. So what has that journey been like for you? Because I know sometimes churches just run things differently. Sometimes they're not super effective. Sometimes they are, but it is sometimes just a different world. So as you've kind of dove a little bit deeper into that, how has that gone for you? And do you see any conflict in kind of treating a church like a business?
Yeah, it can be tricky. And that's something that I've learned over the years to kind of understand the nuances on that. I think it's important to recognize first and foremost that businesses and churches are different, and that's okay. A business should not seek to operate like a church completely, and a church shouldn't seek to operate like a business completely, because they're on opposite ends of the spectrum of ultimately what they're kind of going for. A business is on the spectrum of results. Ultimately, a business is for results, And with results, you get like accountability and measurement. And those are all good things. But if you exclusively have that, it's not healthy for a business. And many businesses do that. Everything is all about the bottom line. It's all about the results. It's all about what you're churning out, what your quotas are, or what your metrics are. And if that's all you focus on, then your people get burnt out. There's so many other complications that come with that. On the other end of the spectrum, generally churches are more focused on the relationships. And, with relationships, you have grace. And that's a good thing as well. And it's a great thing. But if you are completely there and don't have any idea on results or accountability, then that's a miss as well. So I think they're on opposite ends of the spectrum, but there's this big middle ground where you can learn from each other and you can have a measure of both to where a business can say, yes, we ultimately are here for results, but there are relationships that we can have that are helpful and are good, and this is the right thing to do. And on the flip side, a church can say, yes, we are here for the relationships, but in order to more effectively do that, we have to have a measure of accountability, which is something that a lot of churches just don't like. And I mean, I think churches are pretty quick to make changes when it comes to moral or ethical failures, but they're often really slow to make changes for underperformance because their emphasis on relationships and grace. And so, which can be a good thing, but there's this big middle ground where we can learn from each other and operate in a space where we have both. And so that's something I've tried to learn as I've become more involved with the inner workings of a church, to say, yes, there are things that the church, I believe, can learn from the business world, but we don't want the church to be a business.
Yeah, that's well said. If someone listening is in church leadership, do you have any kind of low-hanging fruit or just some business principles just to start with? Like, I know we in recent years we just track everything. Like, that wasn't really something we did probably 10 years ago, but that's something that we're really working on, is noticing trends and things like that. So maybe that's one. Is there anything else that you see that a lot of churches aren't doing that might be something relatively easy for them to start, more businessy?
Yeah, I think, like you said, measurement, accountability, those are big places to start to say, hey, this is what we want to accomplish. This is where we are. And then here's what we have to do to get there. And being willing to have uncomfortable conversations about that, and being willing to challenge people and push them and say, you're not meeting the expectations. Let's get you there or move you to a different area where you maybe can do that. That's hard to do in a church world.
Yeah.
It's easier to do. It's pretty common in a business world. Hey, you're not hitting the quotas, or you're not doing this, and so you're no longer welcome here.
Yeah.
That seems perfectly fine in a business world. That's a different conversation in the church world. And I think that we don't want to get cold in the church world, but we also need to know that, once again, this is something God has given us to do good with. Yeah. We need to be the best we can at that. And that means having the best people, having high expectations, having accountability, measuring performance, and increasing performance as much as we can. Because it's a different culture that you have to embrace. I'm not advocating saying you need to be cutthroat, you need to be all about the bottom line, but I do believe there's opportunity to get better.
Yeah, because effectiveness, it's important for churches, because I think about all the time, like, my salary and my equipment is someone tithed to get me where I am. And so, like, I think about that a lot. Like, it's my job to be effective and to make improvements and to always improve, because I'm the result of people being generous. And so I think churches need to be mindful of, improving and being more and more effective, because first of all, that's what we're called to do, but it's a responsibility being on staff or being a leader at a church. And so I think, that's an important reminder for all of us, I think.
And I love that you said that, because that should be pretty scary to people to think, I am being funded by people's hard-earned money that they gave to the church. Yep. We need to do the best we can with that, not only for God, but for the people who gave this, trusting us to do the best. And we often forget the importance of that. And we allow mediocrity to slide in, or apathy, and that's not right.
Yeah. Yeah, we always need to be striving for excellence for sure. All right, we're beginning to wrap out of time here, Jason. I want to wrap up with hopefully two things. So I'm just curious, Jason, you are just a very good leader. And I think a lot of that's
Well,
probably
thank you.
years of experience, personality, like there's a lot of things in play there. But what are some things that you do or just tips for people listening? How are you continuing to increase your leadership?
Yeah, I think there's a lot you can do. And I learned when I became an owner operator that became more challenging initially than I thought, because I'm in an area where I don't have a boss looking over me, telling me what to do. I have a business partner, but I don't have a boss. And so it became more important to be intentional about my personal development. I think reading books is good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've learned to try to read regularly to increase your capacity, and then not only read, but then share that with others. I think you learn something extra when you read something yourself and then you share it with others and go through it with them. You see different perspectives of that. So reading, I think it's important to also have people in your life who challenge you, who understand you and push you and tell you the truth. For me, I have different people in different arenas that I lean on consistently to do that. My wife for sure is one of those. I have a small group that I'm a part of that I'm very active. And then I have a couple different groups of men that I meet with regularly some are Chick-fil-A owners, some are just non-Chick-fil-A people who are business owners. And we have discussions and conversations about what we're doing and how we're growing. And I think it's important to surround yourself with people who challenge you, and you have to surround yourself with multiple people because the different areas of your life. You're going to have some people who challenge you as a spouse differently than as a employer. And you'll have people who will challenge you differently as a Christian versus, just your personal, physical, spiritual development. So read and have good people in your life. Those are really the two big things I would recommend.
Yeah, those are great. And I'm sure you've maybe kind of worked your way to where you are now, but do you have anything that you want to add about just balance? Like, I know you're a very busy guy, but I just, because we're friends, I know you also do a lot of really fun things. Like you prioritize and I love that. But I know, I'm not very good at this. I think a lot of leaders in general we have a tendency just to push and push and push, and we're not very good at making time for those other things. Did you have to work towards that, or how can we get better at that?
Yeah, that's something that you always have to keep in the forefront of your mind and remember what matters. Sure, certainly business and work matter a lot, but family and memories and moments, those matter a ton too. And so I don't like the term work-life balance. I think people use that and it becomes problematic because they feel like, well, it has to be equal. That, well, a balance means if I'm doing this, then I have to compensate now and go overboard here. I prefer to, when I talk to my leaders, we talk about a healthy work-life blend. And there's seasons where work might take a little priority because of what's going on. I had a pretty busy day today. And originally I started off yesterday thinking that today was going to be a pretty light day. I was actually going to be able to spend some time with my wife and have lunch and do things. And that changed in about a matter of 2 hours. And now it ended up being a pretty full day. That's okay. But then you have to know that, okay, there's going to be seasons when work calls a little bit more, but then there's going to be seasons where you have to intentionally say, let's carve out time and protect that time for family, for connections. My wife works with me in the business at times. And so we have to intentionally turn Chick-fil-A off. We have to not have Chick-fil-A conversations and say, we're not going to be talking about work. We're going to connect with each other, because that's important to build and that relationship, and you have to protect it because a good thing can overrun your life.
Yeah.
The example I like to give is, I love Chick-fil-A, but I don't want that to define my relationship with my wife, because someday I will retire and I don't want to still be able to connect with my wife. The analogy is like the married couple who become empty nesters, and they've spent 18 plus years focusing on their children, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
But they allow that to define their relationship. And when the children are gone, they struggle to connect.
Right.
And so so just like I think a married couple should learn to connect with each other without their children, even though I love our children, we need to be able to connect as a husband and wife. I need to do that with work too. I need to be able to connect with my family aside from work, but still put a strong emphasis on work when it requires. Does it make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I've always thought, like, I love using the word blend instead of balance, because balance by itself is a stressful word. Like balancing anything is hard. So yeah, work-life balance is almost impossible, but I love the idea of thinking of blending those. That's a great perspective.
Well, you look at balance, and then if it goes one way, rightfully so, sometimes you feel guilty.
Right. It's a lose-lose.
Right.
Blend is a lot. Blend sounds like a Chick-fil-A drink or something. Blending ice cream. Okay, well, Jason, you've been super generous. Last thing I want to just wrap up with today. So again, we all are in different jobs, different places. We all have different spiritual gifts. I think sometimes we can elevate people like you because you are the leader. You get more spotlight than some other people. You're very skilled at what you do. So can you talk a little bit about just serving, thriving wherever you are? If someone really is kingdom minded and wants to make a difference, but they're not in that place of position. Like I know you would say that you already have said, we all have things we can do. Any kind of parting words of encouragement or just advice on that topic?
Yeah, I would say just keep on the forefront of your mind every day that no matter what you're doing, whether you're in work or at home or at the store, you're representing Christ as a Christian. And that's a big thing to remember. A couple of years ago, one of my stores, we won a contest called Symbol of Success, which is a really prestigious Chick-fil-A award that they give. We had a great year. My team did a great job. We rewarded my team and did a lot of fun things for them. But part of the reward was I received a new vehicle from Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty exciting. I picked out a pickup truck. It was the first new vehicle I've ever owned in my life. But when I get the truck, part of the stipulations of that award was you had to have this logo on the side of the truck that said Chick-fil-A award winner. And so you had to have that for 3 years.
You love it. You love people giving you attention.
Yeah. Yeah. So I stressed about that a little bit, but it was a new vehicle. I was like, okay. And so I remember one of the first times I was driving that truck and my wife was next to me and she leaned over and she said, you're kind of going a little over the speed limit. Mm. And I was like, yeah. So, and then she's like, there's Chick-fil-A on the side of that truck. Mm-hmm. Do you really want to get pulled over and get a ticket with the Chick-fil-A truck?
Yep.
And I was like, oh, you know what? You're right. So I slowed down. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The next day, the same thing. She's like, hey, you're speeding a little bit again. I was like, yeah. And she's like, Chick-fil-A. I was like, oh yeah. So then I slowed down. And then eventually, like I once went through an intersection and the light turned yellow and I started speeding up. And she's like, Chick-fil-A. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. And then, someone would pull out in front of me and she had to really remind me about Chick-fil-A. So the point is I had to change how I drove every day because I recognized that when I was driving that truck, I was representing the brand of Chick-fil-A, which represents my livelihood. And I, out of fear of misrepresenting that brand, of being on the side of the road with a police officer flashing lights or getting in a wreck or upsetting people as I drove, I had to change how I drove during those 3 years that I had that logo on the truck. And I say all that to say, as Christians, we should carry that exact same burden because we are representing our Savior, Jesus Christ, in everything we do. If we are a Christian, we have Jesus branded on us and people are watching us. And so it doesn't matter what your position is. People are looking at you as an example of Christ, as an example of Christianity. And so my advice, and it's easier said than done, every day remember that what you say, what you do, what you think, how you react is representing our Savior, and we should strive to represent him well.
That's well said, and that's a perfect way for us to end. That's perfect. And Jason, again, you exemplify that so well. Thank you for sharing with us today, and just for the way that you lead your organization and you help out a lot at First and B, and just for your time today. Thank you for constantly being really generous. Really appreciate all that you do.
It's my pleasure, Matt.
The Center for Anabaptist Studies, offered through the Fresno Pacific Biblical Seminary, provides educational resources for pastors, congregations, and leaders to nourish an innovative demonstration of Anabaptist values. The center, also referred to as CABS or CABS, has been partnering with USMB to provide webinars addressing contemporary issues facing the church and Jesus followers today. Visit the USMB website for more information at www.usmb.org.
Well, once again, my thanks to Jason for a really great conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. He just has such a great perspective, just a good reminder for all of us, no matter where we work, no matter what we do, that it all belongs to God anyway. We're just stewards, and we need to be doing a good job of that. So I hope that was a helpful conversation for you. And of course, I always encourage you to share this with your friends. Maybe if you have staff at your church that you think this might be helpful for, if they want to have some help about how you can kind of balance thinking about church and business and how those things are similar and different, or maybe you have a friend who's in the workplace who you think this might be helpful. I'd love your help to help us spread the word so that the show can continue to grow and more people can get this content. So we love your help spreading the word. If you don't mind sharing on social media or text, whatever works best for you, we would love your help. So once again, I want to wish you a really happy Easter. I hope it's a great weekend for you and your church, and whether you're meeting in person or online or some kind of hybrid, I hope many people come and that it's a really, really great weekend. We'll be praying for that for sure. So please enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you back here in 2 weeks for another episode of the Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.